The gunshot echoed across the dark waters below the Nelson Mandela Bridge. Dr. Amahle Nkosi didn't flinch. She stood at the edge, her bare feet cold against the concrete barrier, her white coat billowing in the midnight wind. Behind her, black SUVs screeched to a halt, their headlights flooding the scene. Men in dark suits emerged, weapons drawn, but a single raised hand froze them in place. "That is not your destiny, doctor," a cold voice said in perfect English, tinged with a Korean accent. Amahle turned slowly, tears streaming down her face. The man before her was immaculate in an expensive charcoal suit, his face angular and unreadable. This was Jin-suk Park, the most feared Korean crime lord in southern Africa. Everyone knew his name. Everyone feared it. "How do you know I'm a doctor?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Jin-suk stepped closer, his movements measured and deliberate. "I know many things, Dr. Nkosi. I know you're about to make a permanent decision based on temporary circumstances. Step back from the edge." It wasn't a request. It was a command delivered with the authority of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. Yet something in his eyes, something almost human, made Amahle hesitate. "You don't understand," she said, her body swaying. "I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, my mother is dying and I can't even pay for her medication. They've destroyed me." "Who?" Jin-suk asked, taking another step. His men remained frozen, hands on their weapons but not raising them. "Who destroyed you?" Amahle laughed bitterly. "Does it matter? Powerful people. People I can't fight. People who made sure everyone believes I killed that patient. I'm finished." "You're not finished until you're dead," Jin-suk said flatly. "And even I'm not ready to let that happen tonight. Come down. Now." Before she could respond, Jin-suk moved with shocking speed. His hand gripped her wrist and pulled her back from the edge with controlled strength. Amahle collapsed against the barrier, sobbing uncontrollably. Jin-suk nodded to one of his men, who brought water and a blanket. "Take her to the safe house," Jin-suk ordered. "Get her cleaned up. And find out everything about what happened to her." "Boss," one of his lieutenants protested in Korean, "we don't have time for this." "The shipment." "The shipment can wait," Jin-suk snapped, his voice ice. "Do as I say." As Amahle was helped into one of the SUVs, she caught Jin-suk's profile against the city lights of Johannesburg. Why would a man like him care about a disgraced doctor? What game was he playing? If you're already hooked by this insane story, hit that subscribe button right now because what happens next will blow your mind. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single second of this. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. Amahle Nkosi had been one of the most promising cardiothoracic surgeons at Charlotte Maxey Hospital. At 32, she had saved hundreds of lives, worked double shifts without complaint, and dreamed of opening a clinic in Soweto where her mother still lived. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Then Marcus Dlamini died on her operating table. The son of a prominent politician, Marcus had come in with what should have been a routine cardiac procedure. Amahle had done everything by the book, but something went catastrophically wrong. The young man coded twice and never recovered. The autopsy should have provided answers, but instead, it provided ammunition. The report claimed negligence. It claimed Amahle had used the wrong medication dosage. It claimed she had ignored warning signs. None of it was true, but the media didn't care. Within 48 hours, she was suspended pending investigation. Within a week, her face was on every news channel labeled as the negligent doctor who killed a beloved community leader's son. The threatening messages started immediately. Unknown numbers texting her at all hours, "Keep your mouth shut. Accept responsibility. Disappear or be disappeared." Amahle tried to fight back. She requested the full medical records, the surgical footage, anything to prove her innocence. But files went missing. Colleagues who had been in the operating room suddenly couldn't remember details. Her lawyer advised her to settle quietly and leave the country. "They're too powerful," he had said, refusing to meet her eyes. "You can't win this. Her mother's pension couldn't cover both their expenses. The bank foreclosed on Amalhe's apartment. Other hospitals refused to even interview her. And her mother, frail and diabetic, kept declining despite Amalhe's best efforts to care for her with diminishing resources. That's what brought her to the Nelson Mandela Bridge that night. Not weakness, but the crushing weight of injustice with nowhere left to turn. The safe house was a luxury penthouse in Santon, all marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. Amahle sat on a cream leather sofa, wrapped in the blanket, while Jean Suk's people moved around her with military efficiency. A woman brought her hot food. A man delivered fresh clothes. No one spoke to her directly until Jean Suk returned 2 hours later. "Eat," he commanded, sitting across from her. "You need your strength." "Why are you doing this?" Amahle asked, ignoring the food. "Men like you don't save people out of kindness." Jean Suk's expression remained unreadable. "You're right. I don't. But I have questions, and I need you alive to answer them." "Questions about what?" "About why someone wanted you destroyed so thoroughly," Jean Suk said, leaning forward. "I've had my people digging. This wasn't just about covering up a medical error, Dr. Nkosi. You were framed. Deliberately and systematically." Amahle felt her breath catch. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Dlamini didn't die from surgical complications," Jean Suk continued. "He was murdered. And you were the perfect scapegoat. A talented, idealistic young surgeon who wouldn't see it coming." "That's impossible," Amahle whispered, but her mind was already racing through the surgery, the anomaly she couldn't explain at the time. The way Marcus's vitals had crashed despite everything being perfect moments before. The medication that should have worked but didn't. Jean Suk pulled out a tablet and slid it across to her. "My people are very good at finding information others want hidden. Look at this." The screen showed a complex web of connections. Marcus Dlamini's father, Thomas Dlamini, owned significant shares in a private hospital group. That hospital group had ties to a pharmaceutical company under investigation for illegal organ trafficking. And that same company had recently lost a major contract after a whistleblower report was filed. "Who filed the whistleblower report?" Amahle asked, though she was beginning to suspect. "You did," Jean Suk said. 6 months ago. You noticed irregularities in organ donor lists and reported them through proper channels. The investigation went nowhere, but someone remembered. Someone decided you were a liability." Amale's hands shook as she scrolled through the documents. It was all there. The evidence she'd gathered, the report she'd filed, the subsequent cover-up. She'd been so focused on saving lives that she hadn't realized she'd painted a target on her back. "Why do you care about this?" she asked again. "What's your angle?" Jean Suk stood and walked to the window, his back to her. 3 days ago, one of my shipments was intercepted. Someone tipped off the authorities. That same someone has been moving into my territory, taking my clients, disrupting my operations. I've been trying to identify them." He turned back to face her. "It's Thomas Dlamini. He's not just a politician. He's building a criminal empire, using his political connections as cover. The organ trafficking ring you tried to expose? He runs it. And now he's expanding into my business. So this is about revenge," Amahle said flatly. "You want to use me to get to him." "I want to destroy him," Jean Suk corrected. "And yes, you're the key. But I also don't let innocent people die for others' crimes. Call it a quirk of mine." There was something in the way he said it, something personal that didn't quite fit the cold crime boss image. Amahle studied his face, trying to read the man behind the reputation. "Fine," she said finally. "But I want my name cleared. I want my mother taken care of. And I want Dlamini to pay for killing Marcus and destroying my life." "Agreed," Jean Suk said simply. "My men will move your mother to a private facility. The best care available. You have my word." "The word of a gangster," Amahle said with a bitter smile. The word of someone who pays his debts, Jin-suk replied. Over the next week, Amahle found herself living in a strange new world. Jin-suk's organization operated with clockwork precision. Information flowed constantly. His people tracked Dlamini's movements, intercepted communications, and slowly pieced together the full scope of the conspiracy. Amahle reviewed every medical file she could access, working late into the night. She found it buried in the lab reports, a microscopic detail that the falsified autopsy report had overlooked. Marcus Dlamini had been poisoned with a potassium compound that mimicked heart failure. It would have been undetectable except for one specific marker that required a test no one thought to run because the narrative of surgical error was already set. This is it, she told Jin-suk, spreading the documents across his desk. This proves Marcus was murdered. This proves I did nothing wrong. Good, Jin-suk said, studying the files. But it's not enough. We need to connect it directly to Thomas Dlamini. We need evidence he ordered the hit on his own son. Why would a father kill his own child? Amahle asked, horrified. Marcus was about to expose his father's organ trafficking operation, Jin-suk explained. One of my informants heard the argument. Marcus found out what his father was doing and threatened to go public. Thomas couldn't allow that. The calculation, the cold brutality of it, made Amahle sick. How do we prove it? There's a fundraiser tomorrow night at the Santon Convention Center, Jin-suk said. Every corrupt politician and businessman in Johannesburg will be there. Including Thomas Dlamini. His head of security keeps records of everything as insurance. We get those records, we get our proof. That's insane, Amahle said. You can't just walk into a political event. I can't, Jin-suk agreed. But you can. You were invited months ago as an honored young surgeon. They never rescinded it because they assumed you'd never dare show your face. Amahle stared at him. You want me to walk into a room full of people who think I'm a murderer and steal evidence from a crime lord's security chief? I want you to take back your life, Jin-suk corrected. I'll have people positioned everywhere. You won't be alone. But you're the only one who can get close enough without raising suspicion. This is crazy. Yes, Jin-suk said. But you trusted me once before, on that bridge. Trust me now. The fundraiser was everything Amahle expected. Glittering chandeliers, expensive champagne, people dripping in wealth and fake smiles. She wore a simple black dress that Jin-suk's people had provided, her hair styled, her hands steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. Thomas Dlamini held court near the center of the room, surrounded by sycophants. He was exactly as she remembered from his television appearances. Handsome, charismatic, with eyes that promised understanding and delivered nothing but calculation. Amahle circulated slowly, keeping her head down, until she spotted the security chief. He was exactly where Jin-suk said he'd be, near the back entrance, tablet in hand. The records were digital, encrypted, but Jin-suk had people who could break any encryption if they could just plug in the devices tech specialist had prepared. She was 10 feet away when Thomas Dlamini's voice cut through the ambient noise. Dr. Nkosi. Everyone within earshot turned to stare. Amahle froze, her heart hammering. Thomas approached with a smile that never reached his eyes. I didn't expect to see you here, he said smoothly. How brave of you to show your face. I have nothing to hide, Amahle said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Unlike some people. His smile tightened. Careful, doctor. You've already lost everything. Don't make things worse. Things can't get worse, Amahle replied. But they can get honest. Something dangerous flickered in Thomas's eyes. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. You should have stayed disappeared. Now I'll have to finish what I started. He pulled back, his public smile returning, and walked away. Amahle's hands shook, but she forced herself to move toward the security chief. She had one shot at this. Excuse me, she said, stumbling slightly and catching his arm. I'm so sorry, too much champagne. As he steadied her, She slipped the small USB device from her clutch and pressed it against his tablet. 3 seconds. That's all the tech specialist said it needed. 1, 2, 3. Are you all right, ma'am? The security chief asked, frowning. Yes, thank you, Amahle said, recovering. Just need some air. She moved toward the side exit, her heart racing. Almost there. Almost safe. Then the lights went out. Gunfire erupted in the darkness. People screamed. Amahle dropped to the floor, covering her head as chaos exploded around her. When emergency lighting flickered on, she saw Jin-suk and his men moving through the crowd with deadly efficiency. Get down, someone yelled. More shots. Amahle crawled toward the exit, glass crunching under her knees. She saw Thomas Dlamini being hustled away by his security, saw Jin-suk pursuing him, saw everything descending into violence. Then Jin-suk was there, pulling her up. Run. Now. They made it to the parking structure before Dlamini's men caught up. Jin-suk shoved Amahle behind a concrete pillar and returned fire. The sound was deafening, bullets sparking off metal and concrete. The data uploaded. Jin-suk shouted over the noise. My people have everything. It's already going to the media. We need to go. Amahle screamed back. Jin-suk turned to respond just as a shot rang out. He staggered, clutching his side, blood spreading across his white shirt. Amahle's medical training kicked in instantly. She caught him as he fell, pressing her hands against the wound. Stay with me, she demanded. Jin-suk, stay with me. His men formed a protective circle as sirens wailed in the distance. Jin-suk's eyes found hers, unfocused but aware. You saved her, he whispered. What? My daughter. 5 years ago. Pediatric cardiac emergency. You saved her life. Amahle's breath caught. She remembered that surgery. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, brought in critical condition by frantic parents who spoke limited English. The surgery had been touch and go, but the girl had survived. Amahle never learned the family's name or saw them again. That was your daughter, she whispered. I never forgot your face, Jin-suk said, his voice fading. When I saw you on that bridge. I knew. I owed you a life. Now we're even. Don't you dare die on me, Amahle said fiercely, her doctor instincts overwhelming everything else. I didn't save your daughter just to lose her father. Stay awake. The next hours blurred together. Police. Ambulances. News crews. The data Jin-suk's people had stolen was everywhere within an hour. Every news channel showed the evidence. Thomas Dlamini orchestrating his son's murder. The organ trafficking ring. Political corruption. Financial crimes. The conspiracy unwound in real time across every screen in South Africa. Amahle sat in the hospital waiting room, still in her blood-stained dress, as Jin-suk underwent emergency surgery. The same police who had helped destroy her reputation now wanted her statement. The same media that had crucified her now hailed her as a hero who helped expose government corruption. None of it mattered. All she could think about was the cold man on the bridge who had saved her life because she'd once saved his daughter's. The brutal crime lord who had shown more humanity than the so-called respectable people who destroyed her. When the surgeon finally emerged, Amahle stood on shaking legs. He made it through surgery, the doctor said. Critical but stable. You got pressure on that wound fast enough. Saved his life. Amahle laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and hysteria. Seems I can't stop saving his family. She was allowed to see him briefly. Jin-suk looked diminished in the hospital bed, connected to machines, but his eyes were clear when they met hers. You saved my daughter once, he whispered. I only returned the favor. You did more than that, Amahle replied, taking his hand. You gave me my life back. What will you do now? He asked. I'm going to be a doctor again, Amahle said. A real one. For people who need it most. What about you? Jin-suk's smile was tired. I think it's time I faced some consequences. Made some different choices. The police were waiting outside. They had questions for Jin-suk about his organization, his crimes, his operations. But they also had questions about his role in exposing Thomas Dlamini. The lines were blurred, just as complicated. Amahle stood as they entered. This man saved my life, she told them. He helped expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. He risked everything to get justice for a murdered young man. That has to count for something. 6 months later, Dr. Amahle Nkosi cut the ribbon on the Marcus Dlamini Memorial Clinic in Soweto. Free healthcare for those who couldn't afford it, funded by anonymous donors and government restitution from the corruption cases. Her mother sat in the front row, healthy and smiling. Jin-suk had cut a deal with prosecutors. Information about organized crime networks in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd serve time, but not forever. And he'd used the last of his legitimate assets to help fund the clinic. On Amahle's desk sat a simple note in precise handwriting: "You are safe now. Live well. Your daughter's life was worth saving. So was yours. J." She didn't know if she'd ever see Jin-suk again after his release. Didn't know if he'd truly change or return to his old life. But she knew that sometimes darkness and light existed in the same person. That people were complicated. That redemption was possible if someone cared enough to offer it. And she knew that the brutal Korean mafia boss who'd saved her on that bridge had taught her the most important lesson of all: that your past doesn't define your future, and that even in the darkest moments, unexpected angels can appear. If this story moved you, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you thought of this insane true story, and subscribe for more incredible tales that prove reality is stranger than fiction. Because trust me, we're just getting started.